All right, good afternoon. Today is International Migrants Day, and in his message for the day, the Secretary General stressed that solidarity with migrants has never been more urgent. He said that evidence overwhelmingly shows that migrants generate economic, social, and cultural benefits for societies everywhere, and yet hostility towards them is growing around the world. He called for international cooperation in managing migration to ensure that its benefits are most widely distributed and that migrants' human rights are protected. Today, 2 p.m., the Secretary General will be taking part in a panel discussion at UNICEF House, which you are welcome to attend. And my guests today, the briefing will include Bella Hovey, the Chief of the Migration Section of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And she will also be joined, Bella will be discussing the International Migration Report 2017, which DESA produced. And also here will be Leonard Doyle, the head of communications for the International Organization for Migration. Nikolai Mladenov, the special coordinator for the Middle East peace process, briefed members of the Security Council today in an open meeting, and that's part of the the periodic briefing on the situation in the Middle East, as well as the briefing on the follow-up of Resolution 2234, passed just about a year ago. He said he is particularly concerned to the future of our collective efforts that achieve peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The Secretary General, he recalled, has been clear that ending the occupation and realizing the two-state solution with Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and Palestine is the only way to achieve such vision. Today, however, he warned there is a growing risk that the parties may revert to unilateral action. His full statement is online, and I believe the Council then went into close consultations. Our colleagues from the UN mission in Mali, peacekeeping mission in Mali, tell us that a UN patrol hit a suspected improvised explosive device in KIDAL city this morning. One peacekeeper was slightly wounded. In response to the attack, the UN mission deployed a quick reaction force and an explosive ordnance disposal team to secure and clear the incident site and to recover a vehicle that was damaged. This follows 4 separate attacks against peacekeeping personnel and the premises in Kidal on Friday, all of which were repelled by peacekeepers. One peacekeeper was severely wounded, 2 UN mission staff and 2 civilians were slightly wounded as well, and they were given immediate medical attention. And in a statement over the weekend, the special representative and head of the mission, Mohammed Salif Anadif, strongly condemned the attacks that also put civilians' lives at risk, adding that the mission would continue to repel all attacks in similar robust manner. And the humanitarian coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Kalon, today deplored Saturday's deadly ambush of a convoy carrying humanitarian food supply for people impacted by conflict. He also expressed grave concern over the limitations that attacks on this nature may have on the delivery of life-saving supplies to people in need in northeast Nigeria. 4 civilians are reported to have been killed in the ambush that took place on the road between Dikwa and Gamburu in Borno State. 8 items destined to alleviate the suffering of thousands of people have also been destroyed. And the special coordinator for Lebanon, Pernille Daller-Kardel, met separately this morning with President Michel Aoun and Prime Minister Saad Hariri. She said she also met with Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri last week. Ms. Kardel, who arrived in Lebanon last week, discussed with Lebanon's top leader the key issues that are on the agenda between Lebanon and the UN. She underscored the UN's continued support for Lebanon on crucial issues related to peace and security, stability, and socio-economic development. And humanitarian organizations working in Yemen released a joint statement yesterday on allegations of corruption and bias in the provision of relief assistance, in which they condemned in the strongest terms allegations put forward by the parties to the conflict in Yemen without proper substantiation. The humanitarian partners in Yemen emphasize that they maintain their neutrality and do not take sides with any of the parties to the conflict. Meanwhile, clashes and airstrikes are reportedly continuing in southern Hodeidah Governorate, about 100 kilometers south of Hodeidah. Renewed clashes among southwest coasts have reportedly caused significant civilian displacement, although comprehensive displacement estimates are not yet available. And, That's it. I will stop there and take some questions, and then we'll have Brendan, and then we'll go to our guests. Mr. Lee, why not?
Sure. You just spoke about Yemen, and I may have missed it. Did this airstrike in Marib, did you address that?
No, we're very much aware of the reports, and we continue to call on the parties to the conflict to uphold their obligations under international law, not to target civilians or civilian infrastructure, among other items.
Sure. I guess just because I mean, it seems it's a pretty well-sourced report, and it seems that these were women on the way to a wedding. And
no, I mean we've seen,
right.
as I said, I've seen the reports. We're just not
right.
in a position to confirm them. I mean, the reports as they stand are fairly horrific by any standard.
No, what I meant to ask was this: in creating that list under children in armed conflict, it seemed that the Secretary General concluded or said that the Saudi-led coalition had taken steps to avoid these things. And so I'm wondering whether an incident like this calls into, is it an aberration? What were those steps that they took?
Obviously, the steps they had briefed us upon is better command and control, and more detailed information as to where, I guess, better targeting. I mean, they've told us they've taken steps. I mean, obviously, those are for the military side of the coalition led by Saudi Arabia. All of these events, as events around the world, obviously continue to be checked and rechecked by our staff, and would be then put into the relevant reports. Okay, and I do have a statement on the attacks over the weekend in Pakistan. The Secretary General strongly condemns the attack on a Methodist church in Quetta in Pakistan. He extends his sincere condolence to the families of the victims and wishes speedy recovery to those injured. He calls for the perpetrators of the attack to be brought to justice. Yes, in the back.
Thank you. On Honduras, the Organization of American States have asked for the elections, presidential elections, to be held again because of the many irregularities. Does the Secretary General share these concerns, or what is his opinion on the elections? And I have another question afterwards.
Sure. I mean, we've been obviously following the developments over the last few weeks in Honduras very closely, especially in the wake of the elections. As far as the Secretary General is concerned, he would reiterates his call for leadership with responsibility in this crucial moment, and for a solution to difference within the mechanisms established by the electoral law. He again urges calm and restraint. He's aware of the questions raised by the preliminary electoral observation reports of the Organization of American States and the European Union, and the pronouncements of the Secretary General of the OAS. Yes, ma'am, and then Walter. Yes, you. Yep.
Hi, Iris Prada from Prensa Latina News Agency. A few weeks ago, Guterres proposed several internal changes at the UN.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please make some comments about the progress in the process of reforms?
Sure. The process of reform of the United Nations is not an easy one. The proposals on management reform, on the peace and security pillar, on the development system reform are continuing. There are very deep and detailed consultations with member states, often led by the Secretary General himself. We do hope to have a more public update, at least on the development system report, in the next few days to share with you. But the work is continuing, and we very much continue to hope we will receive the full support of the member states for these efforts. Madam.
Hi, Paige Summer from Al Arabiya. So we saw the Secretary General's report on the implementation of 2231. Does the SG believe that there is clear evidence of Iran's involvement in supplying the Houthis with weapons?
Sure. I mean, I know there was some exchanges last week with the spokesman characterizing the conclusions of the report to 2231. I just want to make it clear that we do not wish to characterize the conclusions and information contained in the report in any way. The information and the Secretary General's words in the report are clear, and the conclusions speak for themselves. Walter?
Thank you, Stephane. This morning, the new government was sworn in Austria. It includes the right-wing Freedom Party. Does the Secretary General have any comment?
You know, we obviously were aware of these latest developments and the formation of the government. Austria is obviously a very important partner to the United Nations, and I hope to have a bit more to say on this shortly. Evelyn, sorry, I thought you would raise your hand, but oh, sorry, Linda, or one of you, or whoever's holding the mic. So since Linda is holding the mic, go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. I just wanted to ask a question about the migration report that said that there are about 260 million people living in countries other than their birth, that of their birth, and that there's been a 50% rise since 2000. I just have a question about policy, UN policy towards migration. I mean, within those numbers, does that include legal immigration, you know, where there are patterns and people follow that? Or does it include sort of everyone, migrants who decide that they want to leave their countries, go wherever they go, and then have the right to stay in the countries?
Well, I think it's a very interesting and detailed questions, and I will let our guest Bella Hovey from Department of Economic and Social Affairs answer that question, because she is much more learned in this process than I ever will be. Mr. Lee.
Sure. This is it may be a different kind of UN reform or changes, but I wanted to ask you. Become aware that you know, throughout the building there's various changes to called like flex space or hot desking. So I learned of the protocol office, which is here on this floor, is being moved down to 3B, and I'm told that it's going to cost $500,000 to essentially rip out the configuration that was put in just under the Capital Master Plan. So I'm wondering, I mean, I know that there are competing mandates on the Secretary General, but how can you justify a recently renovated space being torn down at pretty substantial cost when the UN is also saying it shouldn't face budget cuts?
I don't know the exact cost. The whole point of shared space is to make much more efficient use of the space that we have in this building, which enable us to stop renting and paying tenants outside of the UN headquarters. So we're freeing up a space that we're paying rent on. So obviously there is some cost involved in the creation of that space, but in the long term, it'll be a cost saving.
But in the case of protocol, like are there offices of protocol that are based in the Albano or in other buildings, and was it considered sort of basically for the next 3 months at least, you're going to have diplomats going down to 3B to get whatever information they need?
I think, you know,
Sure.
in any time an organization is being reformed or a space is being refurbished, it involves some inconvenience. The whole point is about better use and more efficient use of the space that we have and cutting down on costs of rental properties.
But was any of this known at the time that the Capital Master Plan built up these spaces, that they would in fact be torn out at greater cost within 2 years or 3 years?
That I
Can you
cannot
get a-
answer. Yes, sir. And then, sorry, then we'll go to you, Evelyn.
Thank you again. On Mexico, Congress just approved a national security law that could further endanger human rights, according to the High Commissioner of Human Rights and other experts of the UN in Geneva. Does the Secretary General have any comments, or is he concerned about these issues?
I can't speak to that because I haven't seen those reports. So right now I would leave you with what the High Commissioner says and what other experts have said. If I have something from the Secretariat, I will share it with you. Walter, I know I have some more information for you, which is that the Secretary General congratulates the Austrian government, led by Chancellor Sebastian Kurz. As Austria is a long-standing partner of the United Nations, the Secretary General trusts that the new government will continue to strengthen the bonds of international cooperation, uphold shared ideals, and play a leading role in the promotion of peace and security, and to promote human rights, foster greater equality and minority rights. Evelyn.
investigate, quote, mishaps, tragedies that their Air Force had inflicted, and that these would be publicized. Has the UN ever seen any of these?
I will check if we've gotten any updates.
And the
on this.
SG gave a very nice comment on his reform on Friday night.
All right, I will leave you with Brendan for a brief briefing, and then we'll go get our guests. Thank you.